Kari.
Hi.
How are you doing, girl?
I am good. I'm
Yeah,
really good. I'm really good right now. Yeah. I
that is
just was like, yeah, I was just like, my feet are on the ground. I am in my moment. I am fully present and I am so safe and supported and just really good.
oh my gosh, that is amazing. And I just want to thank you for being here today. I know that our conversation, wherever it goes, wherever it leads, wherever it flows, it is going to be magical, and the listeners are going to take away so much because you are just, I feel like you're such an open book, which is something that I love about you. And I know when we met, we were just talking about this before we recorded 3 years ago, you were in such a different space, and not that it was a bad space. Like, that's where I met you and fell in love with you and your energy and your vibe and your story. But now here we are, like 3 years later from when we met, and plus a couple months, and you're in such a different space. But what I love is that you are so open with sharing that with people, and I think that is what we as women and moms especially need so much of right now, because we feel so alone so many times. And I just appreciate you for being open, to sharing your journey, because not everybody does that. And people look at social media and think, oh, everyone's life is so glamorous. And I love the fact that you show all of it. So I just want to appreciate you for that, because it's not easy to do. And I know that you are just working through so many amazing things. And I think it's beautiful that you share that with everyone.
Oh, thank you. I received that very deeply. I think that is an incredible compliment. And it's something that I really strive to be exactly who I am in any moment. And there are many iterations of that, right? Especially as I move through my experience. I mean, 3 years ago, I was in such a different place. But for those of you who don't know my story, I actually it was about 3 years ago that I found out that my husband was having multiple affairs. And at that time, I felt really alone. It's funny because I just took a break from social media for a month and I came back on, and a friend of mine was like, hey, I have, it's not a massive following, but I've got a platform, right? I've been building business on social media for quite some time. And a friend of mine asked me, do you feel an obligation to your followers? And I'm like, no, I don't necessarily feel an obligation, but I remember when I first found out about the first affair, I felt so isolated and alone. And it's something that people just don't really talk about. And there were a few people on social media who weren't necessarily talking about their husbands cheating on them. I mean, I found Esther Perel at that time, and that was the only conversation that I was hearing that of interesting dynamics and relationship. I just hadn't been exposed to it, right? There's obviously a lot out there, but I didn't know where to go. But there were a few people online who I looked to give me some inspiration. Like, I would check in on Instagram on like a couple of certain people, Mark Groves being one of them, Peter Kelly being another. They were speaking to me in a way that made me feel less alone. And so as I've navigated these last 3 years, and specifically over this last year, as I've really started to talk more about my pain and kind of what I've experienced, there have been quite a few people in my audience who are experiencing the same thing. And I check in on them. I mean, they tap in on me and they're constantly saying, like, thank you for sharing this. I see that. And so it's not necessarily that I feel an obligation, but I do think that even if we're not going through something, like maybe you're not going through divorce, or navigating infidelity, or navigating dating, or any of the stories that I share, or parenthood, or whatever. When you hear story, we see ourselves in story, right? We can find a resonance in story. And so I share myself. I'm also a very private person. Like, it's funny. It's like I live very out loud, but I'm also a very private person. But I like to share the lessons and use my gift of language to help other people see bits and pieces of themselves in what I'm navigating. So I appreciate the fact that you are willing to reflect that back to me, because that is something that I strive to do. I want to use my story. I want to alchemize some of my pain to help other people. And so I'm here for that. And I really appreciate that.
Oh, well, absolutely. Because you are one of the pages, like you said, a couple people that you would go to, like you're a page that I go to because, I find inspiration in what you're going through and feeling like I'm not alone and that, oh my gosh, good. Like you don't want someone to feel pain, but it also makes you feel like I'm not doing this by myself. I'm not the
Yeah.
only one. Because just everything and the dynamics of things in the universe, sometimes when you go to social, you see so many negative things, and so being able to go on and seeing you work through, what you've been working through the last year. And if you are open, I would love for you to just kind of
Oh
talk
yeah.
about the process, because I do think that would, help so many people. But it's interesting because I've never pulled a card for anyone before, but for some reason I was like, I feel called to like pull a card
Hell
before
yeah.
we talk. And so what came up is true healing. I'm getting goosebumps. True healing occurs when I give myself permission to feel whatever feelings live below the triggers.
Woohoo! That is powerful.
I was like,
I
Gabby,
mean,
thank you.
oh, is that Gabby Bernstein?
Yeah,
Oh,
of course.
yeah. It's funny. I haven't pulled a card. I haven't pulled cards in a really long time. I mean, a couple weeks. It's a really long time
Yeah.
for me. And I just pulled a card right before I came on. Um, okay. I mean, literally that is it. That's my story in a nutshell. So what a beautiful way to start this conversation. I spent most of my life achieving, just finding significance in achievement. I had a really successful career in corporate America. I became an entrepreneur after I had two babies under the age of two and just wanted more space and time. I launched myself in entrepreneurship and I did it well. In fact, I do a lot of things very well. That's just who I am. It's like, I love to suck at things so I can be really good at things and learn new things. Like one of my favorite quotes is by Bruce Lee, the most useful cup is an empty one. So I'm constantly trying to learn new things. So I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
However, I used my achievement as a source of validation, as a source of, this kind of like hustle mentality. I just leaned into it so hard because it made me feel significant. And over the course of my time kind of building my business and focusing on achieving and focusing on these things like outside of myself, having the 6-figure coaching business online and everything else, on the inside or behind the scenes, behind the perfectly polished Instagram and squares and all of that, my marriage was falling apart. I was with my husband for gosh, well, and this is my second marriage, so wait, that's a whole nother podcast. But my ex, the father of my children, we were together for almost 10 years. We were married for 8. And unfortunately, I got a phone call one day that he was having an affair with a friend of mine. And you know I'll preface this by saying, like, if you don't know my full story and you've not heard me talk about it, there's 3 sides to every story. And he's not here to defend himself, right? Like, he has his own reasons as to why that happened and continued to happen. And the 3 sides are his side, her side, and the truth, right? So I
Yeah.
just want to preface that, like, this is only coming from my point of view.
Yeah.
He's a great human, a great father, was just a really horrible partner. And I loved my time with him and I'm so grateful for him because, like I said, he is a really incredible father. But, there were some things that we had to navigate through. And so behind the scenes, as I'm building this business online and being, really building my personal brand, inside, I was crumbling.
Mhm.
And being in the entrepreneur space, you kind of naturally fall into the personal development space. And I was really high vibes only my way through everything. I'm like, everything's happening for me. Like, this is all good. Like, I'm okay. Like this is, it's like high vibes only. I'm grateful for this. And, I was really just like I was doing the best that I could. Honestly, I just, as I was navigating it, I'm like, okay, I've got to find the silver lining. I've got to be okay with it. And if any of you have gone through something hard and you have that friend who's just like, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Like that was me. And that's what I thought. It was literally like oxygen. I thought that that's what I had to do in order to survive. And I really did, because had I let myself feel the pain, I probably would have crawled in a hole at that point. And so here I am, I'm building my business. We have the initial fracture of, finding out about the first affair, and we went to work. We went to work on our marriage. I was like, listen, you're the father of my children. As much as I want to get that bug, can I curse on this?
Yep. Do it, girl.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. Some shows are like, no, no curse. If you have little ears, sorry. I wanted to get the F out of there like so bad, but I had little men, I've got 3 little men, and I was just like, okay, I'm here to figure this out. And I just wanted it to be crystal clear that it was time for me to go. And so we did a lot of work. We went to therapy. I called on my angel ladies. I did a lot of work in my Akashic records. Like I literally did a lot of work to get to a place of healing. And one thing that I didn't do, which I think is so beautiful that you pulled the card, is that I really didn't enter into the pain portal. Like I did not allow myself to feel the pain. And so here I was building my business and really focusing on achievement. I'm like, okay, well, if my relationship isn't going to give me the significance that I want, and I don't feel safe in my relationship, and I'm still navigating this like kind of rebuilding of trust, well, my business won't let me down. So I can always get the ego kick I need. I can always get all of these things. Well, 2020 was the year I focused on my speaking career and hired a speaking coach. And, I had done a lot of speaking gigs, like up until this point. I was building a beautiful platform. I had a podcast, and, I was doing my thing. And I incredibly booked quite a few speaking gigs. I had gotten hired by Nike to come back and speak there. And I worked there for almost 10 years. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, I finally made it. I was on my second speaking gig of the year in Canada, speaking at my beautiful friend Sabrina's retreat. And the world shut down.
Yeah.
And COVID happened. And I was like, seriously? Wait a second. Here I was like finally feeling like I had gotten to this point where I'm like, okay, I'm in momentum. Like when you speak too, like that's great marketing. I'm going to leverage other people's audiences. I'm really building out my programming and everything else. And I'm like, okay, we're finally doing it. I had been doing this for 6 years. Like we're finally going. And then the world shut down.
Yeah.
And in that moment, in the beginning, I think everyone was like kind of just trying to get their feet underneath them. And I was definitely trying to do that. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Do I pivot? Do I focus my marketing on back online and just, do shift? Do I do a shift? And instead, it's kind of like that week between Christmas and New Year's when nobody wants to talk to anybody and they're just like, nobody's working really, I was like, okay, I'm going to actually kind of tap out for a second because I'm really fucking tired.
Yeah.
And so I decided to, Glennon Doyle had come out with her book Untamed at that time.
Love that.
And oh my gosh, it's so good. And I could not get my hands on a copy. And so I had ordered it and I was waiting for it. And in the interim, Amazon was like, well, we could send you Love Warrior. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll go ahead and read that book. So the world is shut down. Nobody can leave their houses. I'm sitting here going like, on the meta, on the macro, I'm like, I'm really tired. I have been hustling my ass off for 6 years, trying to build this business into, a multiple 6-figure, potentially 7-figure coaching business, like building this massive brand online. And I'm just fucking tired at this point. And I'm also not focusing on the right things in my healing process, which I didn't know at the time, but I thought I was. Like we were trying to have another baby. We had 2 miscarriages. Like there was all these things that I'm like doing the best I can to repair, but I hadn't entered into the pain. And then I read Love Warrior and there was something so beautiful. Gosh, Glennon is just a fucking legend. There was something so beautiful about the way that she shared her truth. She talked about navigating, eating disorder and alcoholism and affairs. And it was in the process of reading this book and her sharing exactly who she was, all of her truth, that I saw in her story. Oh, she's sharing her truth and I love her for it. Like, I deeply appreciate and love her for it. And here I was, not only was I like not sharing my truth, but I wasn't even willing to go into my truth. I
Yeah.
wasn't even willing to go into the pain. And so I got into the pain portal, into the pain teacher, right? The pain is there always to teach us something, right? When we are triggered by anything, something small, something big, that trigger is meant to show us what needs to be healed. And when you have good emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, you then remember you have choice to move through those triggers and choose a new response, regardless of the way that you feel. And what happened for me was that I just decided in that moment, like, well, I all of a sudden had this awareness around the fact that I wasn't feeling my feels. Like, I had this deep residual anger. And I just thought that if I went into it, I would get burned. I wouldn't be high vibes only my way through it anymore. I would be like consumed by the anger and the frustration and the betrayal and all of these low vibrational emotions. But I was like, you know what? I can't, like, it was like a congestion of feels. It was a congestion of emotions that I just was like, it is pouring out of me. It's like at this point, like it's like garlic in my freaking cells, like seeping out of me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just going to go in. And so for 2 weeks, I cried, I smashed plates, I've got fucking angry. I just like went into the pain. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, something in that book cracked me open and just told me that it was time for me to start processing it. And so I did, to the best of my abilities. I called in my therapists. I called in my angel ladies. I literally did everything I knew how to do. And I was still married. I wasn't, at this time divorcing him or anything like that. I was still just kind of navigating my experience. And I'm like, I just got to feel these feels. So I started to feel the feels, and then I got distracted again. I'm like, okay, let's sell everything and move into an RV and travel the world and reconnect and get back into an adventure. And so we did that. And that's a whole nother story in itself. But I kind of put this pain process on the back burner. I'm like, let's reconnect. Let's figure this out. And so we moved into an RV, and I'm giving you kind of like the shortened version of it, but we moved into an RV and we were in there for 2 months, and it was the best time. Oh my gosh, it was the best time. I still had this awareness around like honoring my feels and leaning into the pain, but not like I do now. And on that trip, unfortunately, I found out he was having another affair, and it was just quite the experience. And I still even waited another 4 months to actually file for divorce and everything else. Like, I was just like, I need the universe to give me a signier sign.
Something more.
How many signs do I need? And so, long story short, we got divorced. Our divorce was final on International Women's Day, which is just amazing. And a few days after that, I actually met a beautiful man who I ended up dating for about 6 months. It was a beautiful relationship, and it was like, I kind of view him as the person who I was not expecting it. He is my best friend's boyfriend's best friend. So he was like in my circle. I wasn't looking to date anyone, but he is just like such an incredible human. And I kind of look at it as like, he took me from this like burning building and just carried me to safety, carried me to, and like laid me down, like out, like 6 months post divorce, we broke up. It was a beautiful breakup. I cannot say enough amazing things about him, but that was when I really started to excavate the pain, because here I was now completely alone.
Yeah.
And I remember like I had started understanding, I'm writing a book. And so I started understanding that there was this awareness around the fact that I had all this congested pain, that it wasn't until I read Love Warrior that I was willing to engage with it. And I'd started really surrounding myself with, thought leaders and courses and all of these things. I decided like, okay, I've now gone through 2 marriages, 1 breakup, like all of these things. The common denominator in this is me. So it might be time for me to take myself on and see what is here. And so here I was, or am, completely single and ready to do the work. I'm like, all right. And one of the things that I also got really clear on is that, freedom is my highest value, above love, above gratitude, above connectedness. Like, it is freedom. I want freedom to be exactly who I am at any given moment. I want freedom in my relationships. I want freedom to express myself fully. And knowing that that's what I want, I all of a sudden realized like, oh, I told the universe I was ready for freedom. And now I've got all of these experiences that are inviting me into excavating what's inside to give me emotional freedom. Because all of these relationships are mirrors for me to say, okay, what's inside me? Like, how can I? And so to kind of circle it back to this idea of like, I wanted to achieve, that was what gave me this sense of, significance. My ego was like, yes, this is going to make me feel the freedom that I want. When I have the 6-7 figure coaching business, when I have all the money, when I have the perfect relationship, when I have all of these followers and the likes and all of the things, like that is what's going to give me freedom. It's going to make me feel so good. And all of a sudden here I was, and I had some of those things, but I was alone and I had nobody there to reflect back to me, like give me the significance. And I started doing this work. Francis Weller, he wrote The Wild Edge of Sorrow, and it's a conversation about grief and how to process grief. And I started doing this work around really engaging with my pain in a new way. And as somebody who's very cerebral and mindy, like I recognize too that I can't think my way through my healing. It has to have some sort of somatic component to it. Like you have to feel. Healing cannot happen on an intellectual level. You cannot heal something that is spiritual or emotional from the intellect, from the mind. It's something that has to be felt through the body. And I started just building this awareness around it. So I started bringing in more somatic experiences. So like breath work and cold plunge and these opportunities for me to literally take physical pain. So when you get into 39-degree water, it doesn't feel good. So I all of a sudden had this like beautiful physical representation of me taking pain, breathing through it, creating safety in my body by me saying, I'm okay. I'm safe. I got this. I'm going to sit in this water for 3 minutes. And I literally alchemize pain into these beautiful experience, power, empowerment, not to mention like the norepinephrine and all the chemicals that go through your body. And I'm like, oh shit. Like I got me. Like wherever I go, there I am. And so if the relationship that I need to focus on is the one between me and me, I got to do this work for me. And so a lot of my work over the last, since July, so like 6-ish months, 5 months, since I've been fully single and just like in my own space, has been that rebuilding my relationship with me and reclaiming myself and focusing on, like we talked about earlier, like focusing on really honoring the emotion that comes through all of the feels, the kaleidoscope of them. And so much of my work right now is really expressing that. I mean, because as I've really embodied that and embodied exactly who the fuck I am, because again, freedom is my highest value. Like, I don't want to be in a relationship, some contorted version of me. Everyone, I got that feedback that I'm a partner pleaser, a people pleaser, and I just don't want to, it's not what I want to be. Yes. Do I want to make other people happy? Of course. And that's part of being in relationship. But for me, it's really like, no, I want to be all of who I am. And so a lot of what I've been focusing on over these last few months, especially, has been how to tap into the well of creativity inside me and all of these things that I wasn't doing for the last 15, 20 years because I got busy achieving. I was so busy achieving, I wasn't expressing,
Yeah.
you know? And so now it's like if you came to my Instagram, I don't sell anything. I don't do like, I have multiple businesses, but um, I it's just an expression. I write poetry, I share music, I share art, I talk about the things that I'm working through and healing through. And I just feel as though I am all of who I am. And I don't, there's no attachment to anything on the other side of it. And I needed to go through everything that I've gone through in order to be at this space and time so I could be having this conversation so it could land for somebody who's got this in their earbuds right now, so that they can then start their process of building an awareness around the fact that we are the ones who are in full responsibility, right? That was my biggest learning, is that nobody is responsible for the way that I feel except for me. Anybody who comes in relationship with me, friendship, business, romantic partnership, nobody is responsible for the way that I feel except for me. So if I know that, then I am the one responsible for moving through my triggers with as much grace as possible, but choosing a new response because I have choice. I have choice. So yeah, that is my long-winded answer of what
Okay, we
I've
gotta
been
go now.
doing.
No, just all right, we gotta go. That's a wrap. That was amazing. That, I mean, I was feeling it. I was breathing in what was coming out because I knew, like, you can't be stopped, right? Like, this is what needs to be, this is what your spirit or whoever is saying, like, this needs to be shared, because I know that there are going to be so many that need to hear that, including myself. I did another podcast recently, an episode, and that was one of the big things too, that because we talked about, your spouse, and it's knowing that, like, your spouse isn't there to make you happy. Like, only you can make, you're responsible for making yourself happy. And so if there's those other things that you feel, well, they're not making you happy, but it's like, you have to look back at yourself. You have to reflect back and say, well, why isn't this? Like, what is it inside of me? Like you said, you haven't worked through, you haven't really looked at, this is the surface layer. Like, what is
Yeah.
deep down when I really peel back and find out, why isn't this making me happy? What is it about it? And you have to work on that and not expect other people to be there to make you happy, sad, mad, angry, like all the feelings. Like, that's your responsibility. Like you said,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, it is so a choice. And 9 times out of 10, we're not happy because we have some sort of expectation on them to show up in a certain way. Like it's really interesting, there is this thought about, and I believe it wholeheartedly, that our outer world is a reflection of our inner world. You and I could have the same experience. We could eat the same food. We could eat the same, wear the same thing, have the same conversation, but our day, we would be having a completely different experience, right? Nobody sees what you see, even if they see it too.
Mhm.
We all have our own filters of experience. And so when we talk about this conversation of taking radical responsibility for who we are and how we show up, it's really about releasing expectation. And if you've never followed the work of Byron Katie, I highly, highly, highly recommend her process. She has a 4-question process of just like asking if what you're feeling is true, and who would you be without that thought. Right. So if I have a partner who is, in my case, who is cheating on me, and I think, oh, well, it's because I'm not worthy or whatever it is, which that was not the case. It was just, he had some emotional issues that he wasn't willing to work through. Um, uh, I sit there and go, okay, well, I'm not worthy, and that's why he's doing it. Or like, he won't take out the trash because he doesn't want to help or whatever. I mean, whatever it is, right? It could be super big and it could be very, very small, but it's those
Yeah.
moments and those triggers where we're just like, the frustration builds and you're just like, oh, they're driving me nuts right now. And it's like, well, is the reason why they're doing that even true? And who would you be without that thought? How could you show up? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to get to, is that version of us that is free from expectations or anything else. So yeah, I think that partnership is such a, I mean, I'm in a space now where I'm ready to call in a partner. Like I've done a lot of work, and you can only do so much on your own, where like you need the mirror, you need the reflection back, you need to be in a reciprocal conversation or not, right? Like I've been, I'm, I don't know if I would say I'm seeing someone, but we're hanging out. And the other day I realized that I don't really know. We're not really in the definition stage, but I just realized I had feelings, and I was like, oh shit. I don't know if I'm like actually ready for this, because it means like you equally open yourself up just as much as you're opening yourself up to love. You're equally opening yourself up to pain,
Yeah.
because it's the dichotomy. Like we feel pain in relationship or in love because we
Yeah.
love. And so it's like grief and love and joy can all live simultaneously. And this was something kind of goes back to what we were talking about, is that I didn't realize that it's shadow work, right? You may have heard that term about shadow work. Like the shadow's only there because there is light. Love is only there, or grief is only there because there is love, right? If there's the absence of love or grief, it's just apathy. There's nothing, right? So it's I am now in this space of like, okay, I'm equally opening myself up to pain, because I've just felt so much pain
Yeah.
as like after my that beautiful man I was dating, his name's Harry, but after Harry and I broke up, I felt so much pain. And it wasn't just about Harry, it was also about my ex, and like all of this like residual grief that I hadn't been willing to process. And so having that now awareness of like, oh, if I open myself up to love, I'm equally opening up myself into pain. But Mark Groves said it, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something around around the lines of like being a rebellious heart. Like the greatest act of rebellion is to be willing to keep your heart open, even if it's been broken into bits.
Mhm.
And I just resonate with that so deeply, because I'm like, yeah, I'm ready for it, because that's what we're here for. We're here for connection. We are here to expand. We are here to learn. So if I know that the pain is the portal to the healing that I seek, fucking cook the shit out of me. I'm ready. Like bring it on. Although my friend Daniel and I, we talk about this. Yeah, my friend Daniel and I, it's like there's a book called Existential Kink, where it's just like, okay, let's not like all pain,
Yeah.
but it is like, it is. Daniel says to me all the time, he's like, you cast the spell, you asked for this, don't make it suffering. So
Mm.
it's like when we know that the pain is there to teach us a lesson, we can actually make it beautiful. Like, okay, got it. This is something that I need to focus on. I feel this way because I'm afraid that he might reject me. What needs to be healed? Where is the person inside of me that needs to be told that she's safe and she's okay and she is supported, and that she is worthy of everything, that this is just an experience, right? We're just humans having a human experience. And yeah, I'm in that space now of like, okay, let's go into the feels. Like the feels are where it's at. And also emotion is energy in motion. So if we're not honoring it, this is why people get depressed. It
Yeah.
causes all kinds of suffering and physical suffering. Emotion gets stuck in our cells. So there is this real importance. Like if you don't have any sort of somatic process to processing the pain, whether that be dancing or drawing a bath or just something where your cells can actually move the emotion through, it's very important. So I know we
Is
just went kind of all over the place.
No, I love it. I'm with you. I'm staying
Yeah.
along for the ride. I'm like, okay, making notes, mental notes in my head, like come back to that. But is that so? I know that you did a lot of like the ice like work, but
Mhm.
then
Yep.
you would go and like do the heat as well.
Mhm.
So is there
Yeah.
like is that kind of the same thing, or is it like one is like the cleansing and one is just like again that processing the pain and like I'm okay and I can handle this, and is it kind of the same kind of situation that why you do both, or?
Yeah. And listen, everyone's going to do it for different reasons. There
Yeah.
are incredible health benefits to just doing breath work, right? Our breath, our lungs, our brain, and our body are connected by our diaphragm. That's what connects us. So that vagus nerve is what connects our brain to our body. And I, as a very cerebral person, someone who loves to live in her mind and have mindy conversations, I was reading a lot about healing. I was listening a lot about healing, but I wasn't actually entering into the physical somatic piece of it.
Yeah.
Right. I was just trying to intellectualize it. Like, okay, I understand that I need to lean into the pain and do all this stuff. And so at the time, right, it's different for everyone. There are so many amazing somatic practices. At the time, I had just found breath work consistently. And it was just a way for me to, when we breathe consciously, we have to be in full presence. You can't be somewhere else when you're actually taking in a deep breath. Like you're thinking about the breath. You are in that present moment.
Yeah.
Well, so many of us, what we're doing when we start to feel pain is we anesthetize, we drink, we go to social media, we call our friends, we do all of the things, and we don't stay in the present moment. And so for me, just in my experience, because that's what showed up in my experience, breath work helped me, and they all go hand in hand, but breath work helped me get into the present moment, like really be in the present moment and be like, okay, here I am. I've got me. I'm not going to die. Yes, all of these things are happening in my head, but I'm in the present moment. And so not only are there the health benefits to breath work, but also it brought me into the present moment where I could start to actually feel my feels and be like, oh, okay, you're there. Okay, there's sadness. Okay. I mean, I had moments in breath work where I just wanted to fucking scream. Like I feel like I am just like I don't even know how to explain it, but just like I just want to get out of my body,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm like, oh shit, like that's something that needs to be processed. Then I go into the cold plunge, and the cold plunge again is another space where I have to be fully present. If you go now, once you start doing it a lot, like you do go to another place. I mean, that's how you kind of navigate it. But for me, it was like, okay, I'm now fully present. I'm honoring these emotions. Now I'm going into the cold plunge where it's just like, I'm a fucking beast and I'm alchemizing this pain into pleasure and everything else. And it's just a representation of it. Like, oh, okay, I can do this for 3 minutes. I can do anything. I can take any of this pain and alchemize it into pleasure. Like, really, it's like sorcery. You're like,
Crazy.
okay, I'm good. Like it's just like anything painful. As mothers, we do this in birth, right? We're like, okay, we know that there's something on the other side. Like, I mean, it can be anything where you're taking pain and you're just like, you know what? This is just what's happening right now. It's reality. There is pain here, but it does not mean that I am not safe. Right. And so that's what the breath work and the cold plunge do for me. And then the heat for me is really just like, I just feel really good doing it. And there's a ton of benefits and they all
Yeah.
just kind of live in the same space. But for many people, it's, yeah, I mean, you're in there 136 degrees for however long. I just like to sweat and like get all of that out of my cells. And, I take really good care of my body and my nourishment now because I just fucking love myself so much. So it's just part of my practice. So the heat doesn't necessarily like, and some people will probably say different. And none of these are like, this
Yeah.
is the cure all. This is
Right.
just like what was representation for me to bring something somatic into my experience aside from dancing, because that's something else that I do a lot. And then, and now I'm doing it with music. I started DJing. Like I'm doing other things that are just like helping me move energy through. And yeah, so it's different for everyone, but that's how I utilize those tools. They're just tools.
Yeah.
And I love them so much.
Yeah, I think it's really important because as a mom too, it's like thinking that you have to do all the things and you've got to be running and here's your schedule and oh my God, there's no time, but you have to put time in. Like that should be your number one in your calendar. Like, what am I doing for myself? Like, how am I taking care of myself? Because if we can't take care of ourselves and we aren't loving ourselves, how can we love anyone else? Like, how can we love our children? To the extent that we want to, how can we be a good mom if we aren't even showing them that we love ourselves, and we're so harsh on ourselves and the way we talk to ourselves, and we're always putting ourselves down? Then we're teaching our kids that that's what they have to do for themselves, or maybe even their spouse. That's how I treat women, or that's how women want to be treated. So it's just so important to take that time for ourselves as moms, because that's, a lot of the weight lies on our shoulders, because of
Yeah.
old stories, maybe that, we've been told this is what moms do, and they cook and they clean and they manage all the events. They're the social media planner for their kids, and they take them to all the things and the planner. And it gets to be so heavy. And that, I think there's a real like mom burnout. I mean, there's the mom guilt, but there's the mom burnout. And whatever stage I think that happens, I think it's so real.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I just want to expand on that too, because I'm in a different space now. I have my kids 50% of the time. So I talk about this with my friends a lot. Like, I have a rad social life and then I have a rad mom life. It's kind of amazing. It's actually really amazing. I mean, there are times when I'm just like, it would be so much better if I just had them all the time, because then I could just figure out my own groove and everything else. But it's actually really fun. Like, I get to do my own thing. But there was a season where I had 3 children under the age of 3, right? My boys are now almost 9, 7, and 5. So for the better part of the last 9 years, I was a full-time work from home mama. And there was many years, 5, 6 years where, I mean, my youngest is in kindergarten this year. So they were always home with me. Someone was always home with me. So this idea and this concept of like having time for self-care, right? There is a big difference between self-care and caring for oneself.
Mm-hmm.
A big difference, because a lot of people think that self-care is about drawing the bubble bath and doing the things and like pampering oneself and going to get a massage. And yes, I absolutely think that those things are important. But when you have and create a practice around tapping into what you truly need, so whether that be, I need to connect with someone and connect with my friends. I need to not just like check a box over, I'm going to go get a manicure and pedicure. I get a manicure and pedicure every 2 weeks. So I'm not dissing it. Okay. Like, I like my self-care routine is awesome. Like, I definitely take care of myself in that way, but I also really care about myself. I have an intimate relationship with myself. I date myself. I take myself on dates. Like, I ask myself, I treat myself just like I would treat a partner. Like, I ask myself, okay, what is it that you need right now? Am I listening to you? Like, what is it? Because when we actually are paying attention to what we need deep inside, that is actual self-care. That is actual saying like, oh, you know what? I don't actually necessarily need to go drink this bottle of wine with my girlfriends. Instead, I just want to like sit and read a book and have a nourishing conversation, or, whatever it is. But really, for me, as I navigated these 3 kids, like, I would just sometimes like need a minute to just like stand in front of the sink and close my eyes and just like take some deep breaths. That was self-care, right? People used to always say, I can't meditate for 2 hours. Yeah, neither can I. I have a time now and I can't do it.
Yeah.
But I can stop. I can take a deep breath. I can turn on some rad music. I can dance. I love nature. So I go out and hug trees all the time and have conversations with plants. Like, I like that. To me is like, how can I feel connected, free, right? If these are my feelings that I want to feel all the time, connected, grateful, free, empowered, how can I do that right now? How can I care for myself in this way right now so that I feel these things? Because when I do, then I have a greater capacity to be present with my kids, to be present in my relationships, to enjoy cooking all of the meals for whatever, to enjoy being on the PTO, like to enjoy all of these other things, because I'm not burning the candle at both ends, right? My book is called Fuck the Hustle. And it's really about this idea of like letting go of this need for achievement. Everyone thinks that there's this beautiful quote by Ariana Huffington, and it said, life is a dance between letting it happen and making it happen. And I couldn't reconcile this idea of like, okay, I've got to make it happen. I've got to have a busy schedule. I've got to do all of the things. Everyone has to look great so I can take this photo and post it on Instagram for 5 seconds. And then everything, it was just like,
Yeah.
the making it happen has nothing to do with the hustle. Has everything to do with making sure that you are taken care of and that your internal infrastructure is sound, that your emotional body is sound. So you have the capacity, since our outer world is a reflection of our inner world, so you have the capacity to engage in your relationships in such a way that brings you that deep connection, that brings you that beautiful reflection of how brilliant you are. Because again, we remember that we are the ones responsible for the way that we feel. And so when you can connect and be in that space, all of a sudden you realize, wow, like I've got me. Nobody else needs to have me. And the reason being is because I'm taking care of myself. I have boundaries around my time and energy. I am doing the things that I really want to do. And I am no longer contorting myself to be something that I feel as though I need to be just so I don't feel rejected in the moment. It's like this crazy thing that we do because we think that that is what is going to give us the love and a connection and everything else we want. Yet nobody knows who the fuck we are because we aren't even our true selves. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
Like
I feel
we just contort. I did this for so long. And so this year has been a reclamation of who I am because I no longer do it. I'm like, this is me. And now as I enter in relationship, I'm like, okay, I get to practice. I get to practice being me. I get to practice because it doesn't happen overnight, right? There's a process to embodiment. There is a process to it. There's an awareness, you build awareness, and you start practicing it, and then you embody it. So there is a full on process to it. But now I'm like, okay, I get to practice being me. And being me is ultimately the best self-care. And being me means that I'm going to still be human and I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to suck at this. Like I was having a really awkward conversation with a guy I was seeing and I just needed to end it. I was like, yeah, there's nothing here. And I wanted so badly to say, I don't know. I don't know how I feel. I don't know this. I don't know. Cause it's so much easier to skirt around. It's like, oh, I don't really know. And I'm like, no, I know I don't have chemistry with you. I appreciate you as a person. And he was just like, hell yeah. Thank you for standing in your truth and making it so clear. So I don't have to sit here and think about, oh, well, I should have done this and I could have done that. It's like, no, let's fucking stand in our truth. Let's say what we mean and mean what we say and say exactly. And it's again, if we're taking responsibility, I'm just going right now. If we're taking responsibility for who we are and how we show up, then we have to just trust that the other person can do the same. Right. Because there has been so many times where it's like, let me choose my experience. When Harry and I first started dating, he was like, he called me one day and he was like, hey, we had just started dating and we wanted to see each other again. And he's like, hey, I have to tell you, like, I'm seeing someone else. It's not exclusive. There's no boundaries around it, but there is another person that I'm talking to. And I was like, great. I'm not your girlfriend. Like, that's cool. But thank you so much for being honest because now I get to choose my experience.
Yes.
Like, thank you for allowing me to choose my experience. Cause then I could sit there and go, I'm not cool with that. Or cool, awesome. It's like, we're not even giving people permission to choose us.
Yeah.
Because we aren't being us.
Yeah.
Which takes us away from all of the connection and everything else that we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm like, I felt, girl, you like took us to church on that one. I'm like, keep looking at the clock. I'm like, oh shit, you got to go soon.
I know. Oh my gosh.
I mean, we could continue this conversation forever.
I know.
And your book is going to be amazing. I can't wait when is it like determined or estimated to be out? A while?
That's such a good question.
Okay.
Signed the contract for this book 3 years ago. No, it'll be out in the spring. It'll be out in the spring.
Okay.
I'm almost done with it.
Okay, awesome. Because I know you said like when we were scheduling this podcast interview, you're like, I'm going to be done by the time we talk. That's when my social media pause and all those things. So I just wanted to make sure. Where can people
Yeah.
find you? Like, as you do share so much information, and I love all of your fun and your love and your poetry. It's all great. We didn't even get into
Oh,
talking
thank
about
you.
Portugal, but we'll leave that for another
I
time.
know. Well, I'll
Where can
come
people
back.
find you, my friend?
Instagram is my drug of choice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Instagram, I'm at _ Kari Jean, KariJean. Yeah, that's usually that. And then, I have a podcast with one of my besties, Tori Doobie. It's called This Feels Important. We have conversations about all the things that feel important. We both were building businesses and doing the hustle thing. And on the side, we were both navigating divorce and miscarriages and fractures and heartache and everything else, and having these conversations that felt way more important than the conversations we were actually having to the rest of the world. And so we hit record, and it's been really successful and super fun. So yeah, over at This Feels Important on all platforms, and over on Instagram, Kari Jean.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, go listen to that podcast. I've listened to it. It's great. And she is just like she is. And so there's like two
Oh,
people
thanks.
that are just like Carrie, and they're just having this great conversation back and forth. And sometimes they have people on, but it's like, it's an awesome, fun conversation. And you should
Thank
definitely
you.
go listen to that as well. Last question for you. And then I know you got to bolt.
Yeah.
I love to end with, and you've shared so much about that yourself already, but as women, so much of the time we are quick at high-fiving everybody else and being everybody else's cheerleader, but not really recognizing what we love about ourselves. So my question for you is, what do you love about yourself right now?
Oh my gosh. I love the way that I am engaging with my experience. I love that I am so committed to my freedom that everything I do and say and am working through is through the lens of, will this make me free? Meaning, can I be exactly who I am in this moment, in my moment? I love what I'm learning, and I love how I'm expressing myself. And I love the people that I'm calling into my experience and the friends I'm making. And yeah, I love my just desire to see beauty everywhere. Yeah.
Mm.
I love a lot of things about myself.
You do. I was like, okay, keep going. I'm like, you have one more minute.
I love so many things. I
It's
also, there's a lot
beautiful.
of things that I'm like, oh, okay, I could be better at this. But I also love the fact that I'm willing to look at the things that I need to improve on, and just to have grace around my human experience. Like, none of us know what the fuck we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, none of us do. We're all just doing the best that we can with what we have. And when we can show up with compassion and awareness around that, it just brings so much grace to the experience. And yeah. And I just love spending time with people like you, Melissa. So thank you for using your platform and your voice and your time and your energy and your force to help bring conversations like this to other people. It's so necessary and so needed. So I just want to reflect that back to you, that the work that you're doing is really important.
Oh, I'm taking that in and receiving it, and it will go with me through the rest of the day. So thank you for that. And I appreciate your time and your energy and your voice. Everything that you shared today was just magical. So I appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Okay.
Bye, Carrie.
Bye.